rock, shall we dance?
Oh, thanks for joining us here again, my friends. We are back here in the United States of America. I want to identify that for you because each day it gets harder and harder to identify. We're still in the United States of America. It just doesn't look like that. We're hopeful to reclaim some of the appearance and the, let's call it the sanity of the United States of America beginning this next election. But as it is now, there is a certain madness that has taken over things. We just have to sort of sit it out until we can do something about it. And make sure you vote, because we've got to do something about it. Anyway, welcome. I'm Rick Wagner here again on 1100 KNZZ, KGLN 980, and then 90.7, 98.1, 101 something, and several others, internet, signaling devices, ships at sea, of course. We never want to leave them out. They're so important. And look at it this way. We have a lot of ships sitting at sea to deliver goods, miles and miles of them off the coast of Port of Los Angeles. And so they may be listening for right now. I mean, they got nothing else to do. Thanks to Joe. Yeah. You know, on what was it, Thursday, he signed an act, yes, to try and straighten out these shipping companies for raising their costs on shipping goods over here in this. Oh, boy. I'm so glad he's such a tough guy. I hope he didn't have to measure that length of chain now he used on Corn Pop to go after these guys. May have. It's ridiculous. I've never seen anybody blame more people for their own actions, period. And, you know, politicians are great at that. This guy, if there were a prize to go with it, he would win it. And trust me, it would probably be the only actual prize he's ever really run in his life. Does he look like he's capable of winning anything legitimately? No, of course not. So it would be one thing that he could. And what they're saying is, oh, the reason prices are going up is because these huge increases in the cost of shipping. Well, there may be some squeezing going on there by the shipping companies trying to get an extra dollar out of this, but most of it is fuel costs. Look how much of fuel costs. How do they think? How do the people in the Biden administration think that ships move in water? You know, they're not rowed anymore, and they're not pushed by sails over here from China. So how do you think they get here? They have like engines in them, Joe, and they take fuel, a lot of it, and they're really big, and they have all this stuff on them, you know, all kinds of things on them. And so it's not easy. That's a big cost, as you might know. Now, I know Putin's causing all of the fuel costs. You know, we imported 8% of our oil from Russia, and yet we've been able to double fuel prices because of Putin. He is a cagey one, isn't he? Look at how he does this. Food prices, fuel prices, the price of used cars, everything. He's just, man, I never gave him that much credit for being that smart. All I gave him credit for is being smarter than Joe, and which is to set a pretty low bar. But now I'm seeing, that guy's clever as heck if he's able to do that. But yeah, so he signed that act to try and attack the shipping companies. Because, of course, of the chart. And also, I read this probably a month and a half, 2 months ago, that the cost of shipping had doubled, in some instances tripled. And some of it was because of problems in China, because here's the problem, folks. Speaking of problems, is we get way too much stuff from China. And Trump was right. China's got a hold of us in places we don't like people to get a hold of and twist on, because they've got it. They make most of our drugs. I mean, certainly antibiotics, stuff like that. They have pretty much the market locked up on a lot of rare earths. For instance, one that might be important if you wanted to say have an electric anything is lithium, since they have most of the lithium there, or at least they're mining most of it there. We never know in our country. I have to check, because simply because we have a lot of something doesn't mean we're allowed to get at it. It would be better to buy it from people who hate us and treat their own people terribly and pollute wildly than it is to produce it in our country reasonably, effectively, and as clean as we can. Yeah, like we want to go buy oil from Venezuela, which produces the dirtiest oil in the world and has the lousiest way that they get it out of the ground. Saudis aren't great at it either. They don't care that much, but they're not as bad as the Venezuelans. And so that's better. than getting some of that sweet, light Texas crude out of the ground. We just don't want that. We certainly don't want to refine it. I mean, we don't want refineries that the refineries that are out there. I saw where I think Chevron said this week that they've managed to actually increase the refinery amount, even though we haven't built a new refinery in this country, I want to say, since the mid-'80s. And they still managed to increase the output in the refineries that they have. There's only so much they can do. And the disingenuousness of the administration is amazing. It's breathtaking. Well, they need to produce more. How? Well, they have all these leases. The leases are guesses that there's oil under there. They have no idea for sure if it's there. They don't know how expensive it's going to be to get out. And then, let us not forget, the enormous regulatory burden that's piled on all of these companies to get in the ground. Yeah, I can give you a lease, but that's not the end of it. You need to have a permit to drill. You need to have lots of times a permit to build a road into the thing so that you can get into that. You have all sorts of regulations regarding methane and every other thing about that have been just upped and upped and upped the last year and a half, especially, with the sole purpose of pretty much putting the oil and gas business out of business. And you know what it's done? Is it has caused us to increase production of electricity through the use of coal. Now, clean coal technology isn't as bad as what we used to have, but it's supposedly something they really want to stop. And of all the ways to produce energy outside of nuclear, natural gas is really the cleanest. And it's much cleaner than even good coal. But we have so hammered back the drilling industry that natural gas is just not being used anywhere like it should be. And so instead, because we keep increasing the demand for electricity, plants have actually increased the use of coal in the coal plants. I heard someone say the other day that we used to generate about 20% of our total energy, in coal, and then we're now at about 24. I didn't have a chance to check that figure, but it sounds about right. Because when you're an idiot, unintended consequences flow to you like a river. And half of what they want to do here is make it next to impossible to have an internal combustion engine, because, once again, we refer to our earlier point, they're idiots, and they're ideologically driven idiots. It's a religion. They're zealots, which doesn't help it, once again, when you're an idiot. And this is what happens. And so they want part of it to happen because they think it'll force us to go along with what they want to do. And the other half of it is just because they don't know what the heck they're doing. They have no idea what the consequences are. They have no idea how any of this stuff works. If you want to really scare yourself, try and find some program that asks people how electricity is generated, or, how they use a screwdriver, for instance. I mean, there's a shocking amount of people in Washington, I think, that don't know how to do that. They're not even qualified to run a shovel, as near as I can tell from what they have to say. So you have that terrible disjoint between how things are actually done and the people that are trying to regulate how they're done. They don't know, and they won't listen to anybody because they know everything because of their ideological background. But think about it. The people that can do everything have less input every month, it seems like, with the people who decide how it's done. How long can that go on? It can't go on forever. Things, as they say, go on until they can't go on anymore, and then they stop. And I think that might apply to our economy if we're not careful. The inability of the people in Washington right now to have a grasp not only of their own ideology and how unnatural it is in many ways, but how divorced from the reality of how things are actually produced. And as that gap grows, we see the consequences. I've heard people discuss, oil and gas development in connection with drilling and things like that, and at 2 minutes in the conversation, I realized they have no idea what they're talking about. They read some sort of article in Mother Jones, a couple of years ago that was 3,000 words, and they think they're an expert on it. They know nothing. So what do you expect? We'll be back in a minute, folks.